European football. Man United's billionaire co-chairman defends the Football Super League, but condemnation from politicians, professional bodies and former players.
This is the biggest sport in this country and it's a criminal act against the fans. Simple as that. Deduct points, deduct their money and punish them.
We don't want to see a footballing elite which is by the elite, for the elite, of the elite.
We're at Stamford Bridge, the home of Chelsea this morning, one of those 6 breakaway clubs, for the latest on this fast-moving story.
Fast moving.
Discussing the financial implications of this breakaway movement.
Yeah, that's been recorded as well.
Also today, how the pandemic has fueled a rise in stalking, with predators hiding behind face masks. Mass evacuation as thousands are forced to flee their homes as a forest fire rages in Cape Town. NASA is set to make history as it tries to launch a helicopter from the surface of Mars.
Some rain in the far northwest, otherwise it's a mostly fine day today with some warm sunshine, highs of 18, maybe 19.
Yeah, the reason why I'm recording this is because it broke last night.
It's been called disgusting, disgraceful and destroying teams. The late night confirmation that
Never mind,
six of England's richest clubs have signed up to a European Super League of 12 teams has drawn condemnation from politicians, professional footballing bodies and former players. The so-called Big Six are Man United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal and Spurs. And Man United's billionaire co-chairman last night hailed it as a new chapter for European football. Sky News understands the government is looking into what powers it may have to intervene.
Well, the government didn't do anything with Newcastle, did they?
Letting fans down. Our sports correspondent, Martha Kellner, reports.
From Manchester United's treble-winning season to Liverpool's miracle of Istanbul, European club competition has provided British football with some of its most memorable moments. But those 2 clubs, alongside Chelsea, Manchester City, Arsenal, Tottenham and 6 more of Europe's richest teams, are now staging an audacious breakaway. Confirmation came late last night of the news many in football have been dreading but expecting for decades. The so-called European Super League is now almost reality. Joel Glazer, co-chairman of Manchester United and the new vice-chairman of the Super League, said, by bringing together the world's greatest clubs and players to play each other throughout the season, the Super League will open a new chapter for European football.
But it won't.
World-class competition and facilities and increased financial support for the wider football pyramid.
I'm disgusted, absolutely disgusted. I'm disgusted with Manchester United and Liverpool most. I mean, Liverpool, they pretend, you'll never walk alone, the people's club, the fans club. Manchester United, 100 years, born out of workers around here. And they're breaking away into a league without competition that they can't be relegated from.
The Premier League warned it would block the formation of any league, and UEFA warned they will ban players involved from their international competitions. Even though a breakaway has been mooted several times in recent years, this is the closest we've come to it actually happening. The tremors fell in the highest office. The Prime Minister tweeted, plans for a European Super League would be very damaging for football, and we support football authorities in taking action. They would strike at the heart of the domestic game and will concern fans across the country. Real Madrid president Florentino Perez has long schemed for this league, which gives elite clubs more power and money. Under the proposals, he would be its chairman. Beneath him would be a trio of American billionaires: Arsenal owner Stan Kroenke, Liverpool owner John W. Henry, and Manchester United co-chairman Joel Glazer.
I think it does come back to greed. Obviously, we've seen new ownerships come into the English game, buying Premiership clubs, Championship clubs, League One clubs over the last, 10, 15, 20 years.
I'm reading sort of things like banned from other domestic leagues, kicked out of the Premier League, international players not allowed to play for their countries. So, got a question, is it worth it?
I just like the Champions League and stuff as it is, so I think they should just leave it.
Some argue the proposed breakaway is just a natural continuation of the relentless monetisation of the game.
Businesses have involved themselves in football much more frequently, and we've seen the increase of the of course, of the size of the Premier League and of European competition. With that, we've seen bigger commercial deals, some sponsorship endorsements, players, of course, getting paid so much more money, and that naturally makes it a more attractive competition to invest in.
In many minds, football long ago sold its soul, but some fans will undoubtedly be repelled by yet another example of the game's obsession of money and power at the expense of fair play. Martha Kellner, Sky News.
Orlando Brady is at Stamford Bridge, home of Chelsea, for us this morning. Look, what about the fans? We keep hearing, Enda, that it's a betrayal of the fans. What do they actually think?
Universally negative reaction to all of this news this morning, Stephen. I just spoke to one fan in the street here this morning who happens to support West Ham United. We're outside the home of Chelsea Football Club, and this West Ham fan was making the point that if the Premier League season were to finish right now, only 2 of those breakaway 6 English clubs would actually qualify for next season's Champions League, and England would be represented by the 2 Manchester clubs, Leicester City and West Ham United. And therein really, I think, is the problem that the so-called elite clubs have. Clubs like West Ham and Leicester pushing on into those European places and forcing out Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool and Tottenham. And this West Ham fan was very, very angry about what is being seen as an unprecedented power and cash grab by the so-called elite clubs. So a lot of anger out there today in response to that late night statement that came in about 11 p.m. UK time last night, confirming plans for a European Super League. Malcolm Clark is the former chairman of the Football Supporters Federation, and we can listen to him now.
We're totally opposed to it. I haven't yet spoken to any fan since this broke who is in favour of it. The supporters organisations at these so-called big clubs have all come out against it. As far as I can see, everybody who cares about and respects the tradition of English football is against this.
Now, I've spoken to people behind the scenes at Chelsea Football Club this morning. They tell me they won't be commenting officially today. There is a Premier League game against Brighton and Hove Albion tomorrow night, and the players will be training at their Surrey base. There is a press conference scheduled later on with Thomas Tuchel, the Chelsea manager, where I'm sure he will be asked his opinions about this plan.
Okay, Enda, thank you. Well, earlier I spoke to the Housing Minister, Christopher Pincher, who told me that the game shouldn't be run by an elite.
Pardon me?
Well, our concern is for the fans, that they have the best possible sporting experience that they possibly can, that they're able
So they should.
to support
They're paying enough
their
money.
team. And we don't want to see a footballing elite, which is by the elite, for the elite, of the elite. We want to make sure that grassroots sport is supported.
Well, that's where it
and
starts,
that
grassroots.
fans are able to enjoy the kind of experience that they've had over the last several years. So if there's a choice to be made, we're on the side of the fans.
I mean, obviously, the grassroots game has been severely affected by COVID. Joel Glazer, the co-chairman of Man United, has said the new league will result in increased financial support for the wider football pyramid. I mean, do you believe him?
No.
Well, it's not what people like Jamie Carragher are saying, not what other footballers are saying. You just heard Roy Keane speak on your programme. I think we need to make sure that the game is supported, that the grassroots game is supported particularly, and that will be at the forefront of our minds when we have those discussions with the game.
Well, let's speak to former chairman of the FA and former Manchester City chairman, David Bernstein. Good to see you this morning. What do you think, David?
Well, I think it's a seismic moment for football in Europe and in this country. I'm personally very much against it, as in common with who appears to be nearly everybody else. I think it destroys the pyramid of football, and we've all spoken, forever about the importance of the pyramid, how the dream and the aspiration of clubs developing, clubs rise and they fall, they get promoted. Clubs like Manchester City, who 20 years ago were in the first division and playing Gillingham in a playoff final at Wembley, become what they are now. And Leicester City now have punched above their weight. So I think you're removing all that dream, that aspiration. I think it's very, very sad and very dangerous. So I am absolutely against it.
Is it greed?
I think it's a mixture of greed. Do you know what? I think there's desperation as well.
Yeah, desperation.
A number of these clubs, not all of them, have handled their affairs very badly. They are hugely in debt. I think one of the English clubs, who you can work out who it may be, I believe has more or less £1 billion of debt. So I think the Spanish clubs, we all know the Spanish clubs have massive debt. So I think that this is a way of dealing with a desperate situation, which COVID has accentuated. And of course, one of the things that hasn't happened in football, I thought it might do, but it hasn't, there's been no wages control. There's been no reduction in massive players' wages during this difficult period when clubs' incomes have gone down. So, the whole industry has sort of contrived to produce a sort of critical situation where certainly greed is a factor, but I think desperation is as well.
I mean, in terms of wages control, I mean, has the whole industry for the richest clubs at least become too bloated? Does the whole structure need to be looked at a little bit?
Well, it does indeed. I mean, the inflationary aspects of clubs at the sort of top of the game, the big clubs paying these huge salaries, has percolated down the pyramid. So we have a situation in this country where the Championship is in serious trouble. I think the many clubs in the Championship are under massive financial stress. Well, you may know, Gary Neville is part of this. I put together a group of very, very strong people, and we call ourselves a manifesto group, and we put out, if I may, I can show it to you, the manifesto Saving the Beautiful Game, Manifesto for Change, where we have spoken about governance problems in football, financial imbalance, self-interest, and lack of independence. And we are calling, and have been for a number of months now, for an independent regulator to be appointed as a matter of urgency. In the view of this, even greater urgency, to bring some unity and some independence back into the control and governance of English football.
If this does go ahead, and they're talking about kicking it off in, I think, as soon as August, if I think I'm right in saying, what would you support happening in terms of some sort of punishment? And there's talk about kicking these 6 out of the Premier League. There is talk about stopping some of their players playing for certainly the English national side. Would that make an impact? Would you support that?
Well, I think what we're going to see is some lawyers, a lot of sports lawyers earning a lot of money out of this.
Yeah, sports lawyers.
A sort of face-to-face, I think, between the football authorities, FIFA, UEFA, maybe the FA and so on, and this breakaway group, and we'll have to see what's possible. Yes, but if you're asking me what's desirable, I would say that world football needs to get its act together.
It does, yes. You're quite right.
Clubs and the players to make sure this doesn't happen, and I would support some drastic matters such as barring players playing international football if they play for clubs who break away like this. So, but I mean, this is a very difficult route that's going to be followed, and it will be complex and expensive and very divisive.
I mean, I guess we are unlikely to hear from more than, I don't know, 1 or 2 of the players themselves at these big clubs. I mean, obviously they've got their own restrictions. They are employees in effect.
Absolutely.
But what do you think? I mean, looking between the lines, David, and you know this better than most people. What do you think they actually think of this?
Well, it's an impossible question to answer, really. I mean, different players will think different things. I agree with you. They've got to be careful. They're employed by the clubs, and they have to take care. I'd rather, in a way, focus on supporters and on fans, because supporters do have huge strength if they're prepared to use it. Now we know the loyalty, and I've been a fan of Man City for the last for over 50 years. We're all